Welcome to another episode of Pulse of Polynesia. I'm your host, lelei, coming to you live from Texas.
And I'm Arlington. Wherever you're tuning in from, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, whaftai, mālō, aupito for being here.
Tonight is special. We're bridging oceans and time zones. Our Saturday night here in the U.S., her Sunday in the Kingdom of Tonga, and we're honored to sit with a voice who lifts up everyday people with extraordinary grace.
So our guest is, and I'll try not to butcher your name too much, Haitelenisia, short as Sia, Uhila, Angilau, the founder of Ordinary Tongan Lives and the owner of Grace Consultancy. She's a storyteller, a mentor, an advocate, a daughter, a wife, and a mother whose work reminds us that the heart of our island beats loudest in the lives of ordinary families.
Here's what to expect. We'll travel through Sia's journey, family roots, faith, becoming a wife, a mother, the moments that shaped her voice, and how that voice became a home for other people.
All right. Whether it's Tonga, diaspora, and allies around the world, settle in. Sia, mālō, lelei, and welcome to Pulse of Polynesia. Thank you for sharing your Sunday with us.
Before we dive in, let's welcome our sister all the way from Tonga, and she goes by Sia, and so we're honored to have you on our podcast. Welcome, Sia.
Thank you for accepting the invite.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the opportunity to share your story with us, and also before we start, I wanted to ask you, like, what it's Sunday there, so how's the weather in Tonga?
Although weather is good right now, this is we usually call this our wet season. So it's usually rain. It's winter if you have seasons, but in Tonga we usually say there's dry season and then wet season.
So that's something me and Arlington probably needs, right? Because we're like in the
definitely.
hundreds right now.
Yeah, we need a relief from all this dry and hot weather in Oklahoma. Yeah, we can use some of that relief right now.
Yeah. So let's start with the first question. So before we start, I just wanted to share. So I grew up learning that I'm the only one, and it didn't hit me till I was in elementary. One of the students came up to me and said, "Why is it that?" So I have six. There's six of us siblings. Why are you the only one in your family with a Samoan name? And that was elementary, and everyone has a Palangi name. And I grew up wondering why. But as I learned about my name being named after my grandma on my dad's side and my great grandma on my mom's side, I start to have a lot of appreciation of who I am and the name that I'm named after. Sia, pronounce your full name and tell us the story about your name and what it means to you.
Did we lose Sia?
We did. Okay.
Okay.
Let's get
Well,
her
while
back
she
on.
tries to come back on, I just wanted to touch on what she was saying because it's interesting what she covered. There's something similar on my mom's side of the family. You have the honor of carrying your family's name and the legacy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it puts a lot of pressure on us to live up to that expectation, especially if it's a title or someone's significant importance in the family. And when the name falls upon you, you sort of, you're afraid to, every step that you do, you're trying to make sure that you place that honor on it. And she also mentioned legitimate child, something that's also common across even in Samoa,
Yeah.
whether it's a legitimate child or we call it the adopted kids, right? The Samoa, we always adopt someone either in our bloodline or from someone, like a sister or a brother or a cousin's child. Sometimes, you see it more common when you don't have a son in a family. So you'll see them adopt a son. And then it's not until years later when people start talking about their lineages and they find out, wow, I'm not really in the bloodline.
I love that she shared that because when I was looking at her name, it's like there's got to be a story because I have a story behind my name, and I always wonder why my mom's other side of the family didn't want to call me by my full name. They would call me by my middle name because my mom was, is the same situation, and not legitimate, but she was, let's just say her parents weren't married, and so the story goes that they didn't like the name. And so I hated that part, right? But so when she was telling her story, I was like, man, I totally feel that and I get it. But it makes you carry the name proud because it tells a story, it tells a journey, but it also it makes you appreciate because I was named after both my grandmas, both of them different, and they wanted to name. And so I see where she's coming from. I love her story, and I can't wait till she gets back on. She just said that she's gonna try to get back on it, um, back on again, and hopefully
Mhm.
service is better where she's trying to find.
Yeah.
We got a comment on here.
From High Chief, Talofa Sister Leaso, Talofa Chief Tasi, and mālō lelei Sister Sia. Talofa High Chief. And I want to go back to the middle name thing because I have like a funny story. Growing up, we never understood why. So my dad's name is Niuleava, and my dad got his name from his grandfather, which was Lopa
Mm,
Niuleava. So a very important figure in our family who carried a Lopa title, but then Niuleava is a name that is carried in the family repeatedly. So it went to my dad. But then dad did something interesting. He made all of us, me, all the boys, all our middle names were Niuleava. And growing up,
really?
we didn't feel unique, right? You're like, why did we all share the same middle name,
Yeah.
Niuleava? And it kind of bothered us at a younger age because everyone else had a middle name, but we were all Niuleava. It wasn't until we started getting older and then people started talking about the lineages and we were learning more about the bloodline. And then now we understand that's why dad wanted to put those middle names in there. It was his way to remind, the next generations
Mhm.
to come, these guys are actually from that bloodline, the Lopa and Niuleava bloodline. It was his way of, it's kind of like staking your claim. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to say we belittle our Samoan folks, but sometimes people, it's the older generation. They knew that whether my kids stray too far, if there's any dispute on any bloodline, look at the name, right? First name may not
Yes.
make sense. Second, last name might not make sense, but the middle name, it ties them to this bloodline. So it's interesting how we share those commonalities with our Tongan brothers and sisters. Yeah. Hey, there she is.
Oh, Sia, please continue. We were just talking about, the story and the journey behind, people's name. And so continue to go ahead and share. Continue.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. So I was on Uhila, even though like I don't have the full story behind that and why we have Uhila, and like my father went and served a mission with his brother in the same mission in San Jose, California. They ended up
Wow.
having being companions because of their different last names. And they look so different. Yeah, so they were companions, and his brother had Elder Tukuafu, and my
Mm.
father had Elder Uhila. Nobody knew that they were biological brothers. And
But
so
did they know that they were siblings? Did they know
oh
that?
yes, they came
Okay,
from
but
Tonga. They came from Tonga to the missions, but I
they're
think
like, don't
after
say
they were
anything.
called as companions, they told the mission president, and then they were no longer companions, but they were serving because of their last names. And so we've been told time and time again, they're like, "Oh, you guys should change your last name to the actual family name because it should be Tuguafu." I'm like,
Yeah.
we'll just stay with Uhila. My father died with that last name as well, so I just let it there, let it be there. And Angilau is my husband's name,
Mm.
and I
Is
love that because
Angilau a
now I
Tongan name? Is it a
no,
Tongan
it's a
name?
Samoan name.
Oh,
Yes, Angilau
I
is a
was gonna
Samoan
say,
name. Like I was so relieved to have Angilau added to my name so that I can do away with the confusion around
yeah.
Uhila Tuguafu, and not having that on paper and whatever the story was. But like I was so glad to come and have a family last name Angilau, and it's a huge family, and it's funny because we went to the States, and the Angilau family, we had a family reunion, and they were telling me, they're like, Sia, did you know, like our family, we're so well known here for having higher education. Almost all our children are in the university. And I'm like, man, that's great. I'm so glad to marry to this family. And it turned out that what they were saying is like almost every family has Angilau that's in jail. And so when they told me about university, that's what they meant. So when we went back, I said to my husband, what last name did I just take upon myself? But yeah, I learned. I think last month I talked about one of the grandfathers on my husband's family. He shared he has passed on, but I listened to his interview, and he said, so my husband's great grandfather was in Samoa, and one of the chiefs from here in Tonga came to Samoa and brought him to Tonga. And he married here and had children, and so it came down. So Angilau is actually a Samoan name. Even though, jokes aside, in terms of the last name, I tell my husband, like this is a chance for you and whoever carries the Angilau, and I want to teach that to my children, to carry their last name with pride. And even if they're known for going to the university regularly in the States
Yeah.
or in Tonga, they can also be known for something good, that they did good with the last name Angilau. And I hope to also add on a positive side to to the Angilau.
Yeah.
No, I like that. What do we have down here, Lasso? Give me a
Okay.
second. Let me read some more comment.
Let's the first one. Okay.
Talofa.
Talofa Lasso. Okay, this is the one he was saying hello to us. Okay. So we're talking about sounds typical in the 60s, 70s for parents to use the dad's first name as middle name for their children. So when you're off, Sia, I was sharing how my dad, interestingly, used his first name as all of our middle names. So all our brothers, me and my two brothers, shared my dad's first name. We're all ʻUhila is our middle name, and he did that to ensure the greater family knew that we have tied to the ʻUhila name. So I think that's what he was referring to. And continuation. Here's a funny one. Some of us have our dad's first name as our last name. True.
Yeah.
Which causes a lot of confusion with other families of the same name. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or using dad's first name as a last name instead of using the family name. Yep.
I also learned when I was in university, I did a lot of research, and some of the things that came up, findings in the research said that for us in Tonga, we didn't really have last names until the missionaries came. And that's when that tradition of having last names, like they just had first names and that was it, So I think that had a lot with the confusion. Maybe around that time, it wasn't so important whether you had a last name. It was just you had a name and that was enough.
Yeah,
What you
that makes
mentioned
sense,
is
right?
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Les.
That makes sense because like as was mentioned in the comments, because my grandpa, our last name, my maiden name is Posala, and that's my grandpa's first name. And so when we do the genealogy, it's pretty hard to do genealogy
Right.
because you have to remember like, oh, we got to go by the first name, but pick up his. But yeah, like you said, that makes a lot of sense when the missionary showed up. We just had this last name created, which
Yeah.
interesting.
And we
Yeah,
confused ourselves.
Yeah.
I came across something. I can't remember where I was reading that. It was one of the articles, and they mentioned that the chief doesn't designate his son a name. I think that he has a generic name, but that's not his name until he takes the title, and he actually will inherit the title name. But he never really had a name from birth. I thought that was interesting. This was on, some Samoan family. They were explaining like the chief's role and the son's name designated. So I learned something by reading. Just like what you said, Leo. So like when I'm digging for my family name, I'll go and they'll have the chief name like in 1840, 1850, 1860. And I say to myself, I know this is not the same chief. It's the same title, but it's not the same person because there's no way he's living for 4 or 5 decades. you
Mhm.
know, but yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. So I wanted to ask you, as we're starting a new week, and for you, Sia, it's a Sunday, it's a Saturday for us, and we're about to end this week. This past week for you, what quiet kindness reminded you that you're on the right path?
Man, I had thought when I read that question, I had thought of something else, but just 2 hours ago, we came from prison. We went to visit someone there, and
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sia.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there. And we have this thing, between me and Lea. So we sometimes question our work we do.
Yeah.
And the outreach that we have. Does the work that we have on our podcast have any meaning to our Polynesian or Pacific Islanders? And there's times when we get affirmation from our viewers, like the messages. And it feels great to have that feeling. But then the other thing is, we haven't shared this with our audience, but I think this is a good moment to share this. The last 3 or 4 podcasts, interestingly, the topics that we covered prior to the following week, and I'll give you an example. We had Coach Talofa on, and just out of a random question we asked him about the tsunami in 2009. And he shared his story about the tsunami. And then the following week, we have this tsunami warning in the Pacific. You can call it coincidence, right? But then the next week or two, we had the two twins, not the twins, but the surfer girls on, C and Sive. And some reason I wanted them to have like a safety announcement and talking about rip currents and rip tides and the dangers of that. And then the following week we had a kid that drowned in Samoa and because he was taken out by the rip currents.
Yeah.
We were talking about the same place, Leala. The Leala was like a danger place we talked about on our podcast, and somehow the kid drowned in that same area. So it was kind of eerie, but then at the same time we were talking to each other. We said, yeah, so, what's going on here? So we kind of brushed it off and said, okay, we'll see how it goes. And then last week, Lasso?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the airbase, Leone Air Base. And we had a good talk. It was fun. Like Lasso was saying, this is where I walked to, to her village. And then all of a sudden, this week, that was the topic back home. There's a dispute over the airbase. The government wants to purchase land near the airbase. And then they talked about the airstrip and all that. A lot of things were just so ironic. I'm not saying we're Nostradamus or anything, but it gives you this feeling, an eerie feeling that the topics that we're covering, they're so random, but all of a sudden, it just seems like they become the highlight of the next week. But I wanted to get back to where you're saying, how do you know that you're on the right path is through prayers and then through our audience. But then some of these slight visions that are somehow coming to light is what we say to each other. That's sort of our confirmation that the work that we are doing is somehow, we know that we're on the right path. A long way around to try to tie it back to, prayers and believing in the Almighty and His guidance. So
Yeah, I wanted to add to like last night we were talking and I didn't even know that me and Sia attended the same school. We were there for 2004 to 2007
okay,
and we graduated the same time. We walked on the podium the same time to grab our degree. And we also work part-time in the same area. So I thought it was such a coincidence, Arlington, as you're talking about this, because,
hmm
like I was telling Sia, like when I was studying her life, her journey for just what's on the surface layer, and she had asked me about, okay, about what did I think about that? And I told her, like, I'm very interested in the journey of how you got there. Because we could talk about accolades all day, right? But I think what really is comforting and, soothing for me was learning of her journey. And it made me, and she froze up. So hopefully we try to get her back on again, was learning about her journey and how she came to where she is now. And I'll let her share that part of the story when she gets back on. But she's got such a good, humbling story to tell. But before we do that, Arlington, we have another comment on here. So let me put it
yeah,
up.
let's bring it up. Samoa from the Bay Area. And then you have siblings with different last names, some using their dad's last name, some uses their mom's last name. That's true. Like I'm guilty of it. I use my mom's last name on my Facebook account. I'm trying to let my mom's side of the family know that, hey, I do exist on this side.
You know what? I was just laughing about that, but then I just realized I'm doing the same thing using my grandma's last name instead of my grandpa's.
Killing of confusions for solo ako. That's so true.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, especially for the younger generation. Let me try to pick her up on there. Okay, so as we wait for her to get back on, because her service is bad. And again, just letting all of our audience know that she is in Tonga and it's a day ahead. And so that's very interesting. But yeah, Arlington, just to go back off of what you just said, right?
hmm
And circling back on just the how things come into place and it's not like we know the future, but it's just like it's almost like, okay, well, what else do you want us to like the Lord is leading us, right? Leading us to
Right.
where we need to be and bringing the guests that's needed to be on here to share their stories. And it just baffles me, not in a bad way, but it just humbles me, to be patient and obedient. And then later on to find out, okay, well, this is the purpose and this is the reason why we had them on. And so that's that truly in itself a blessing.
hmm And things have changed a lot since our earlier podcasts.
Mhm.
There were times when seems like we were defending a lot of our viewers. For some of those who weren't with us maybe several months ago, we try to stay neutral and we try to be very opinionated too. And there's a lot of subjects that we talk about, whether it's falavelavas, alofas in church.
Mhm.
it can be very sensitive to our audience, and we know we riled up a lot of folks. It wasn't intended to stir up, folks. But then we also do things as talk about families. What do you call it? Pedigree, right? But we
Mhm.
only bring up their pedigree if it's available, like in Kramer's, if it's available in some of those, or the Falupingas, right? Or different island stories. Whatever is public, but we also are careful to say this is set in stone or this is gospel, right? We
Yeah.
always use the word gospel. So we're careful not to say this is gospel. But we like sharing the resources. We like telling people this is where I found it. And if you're only an oral tradition person,
Hello. Maybe we should
I
talk
forgot
about
to ask.
stable internet connections.
Okay, Sia, thank
What
you for
time is
coming
it
back again.
in, what time is it in Tonga again? I'm sorry.
It's
It's
around 4, right?
4:32
It's
now,
4,
so
4 p.m.?
28 minutes to 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Sia,
Yeah.
when I was attending BYU, right, I was
Yeah.
very, let's just say I wasn't very vocal or the way, I am now. I'm
Yeah.
guessing it was the same for you. So how was your experience at BYU? Was it your first time leaving Tonga to come
Oh,
to
yes.
BYU in Hawaii? So
Yes, yes.
that's got to be like a culture shock, right? So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, and to make it worse for me is because I'm the first one in my family
Yeah.
to actually go to university. My parents didn't make it to university. Our highest education by then was just high school education, and around my village as well, like they were struggling to just get people to graduate from high school, even though, there were people that went to university, but a lot of them hadn't come back or returned back to our island. So I didn't really have people to go to kind of guide me and tell me how things would be and all that. So when I came to Hawaii, like that was the it was a lonesome journey, I would say, because I didn't really have guidance. I knew I didn't have to, like, my parents couldn't help me with the next step. I didn't always have someone to go to and ask and guide me along the way. So yeah, that was such a culture shock. But I had an uncle in Hawaii, so when I got there, he told me, and like I had a purpose for coming, and so I like to think that I remained true to that purpose. I was coming for an education, and my education was to return home to serve my people and also serve my family and all that. So when I was there, I was such an extrovert because when I got to Hawaii, I was just like so eager to get to know people and everything. So I don't recall being homesick. Well, like I just loved being out there, and the people there. And I guess maybe I'll have more to share about my journey and my childhood and growing up. But
Yeah.
because I come from such humble beginnings, everything was luxury to me. And so when I remember when people were complaining, I was like, man, this is such a small campus. I'm like, are you kidding? It's like a huge campus, like,
Yeah.
oh, we're so far away from town. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's so much to do. There's a game room. There's this, there's that, like, so I was just that kid. Like I just really enjoyed everything and was grateful for everything, really, because it was just better than everything that I had left behind. So when I was there, I made lots of friends, and which is why I'm like, man, we were at the same time, but like we didn't know each other because I was pretty confident I knew almost everybody when I was there in Hawaii, because I would go down the hallway, say hello to everyone. Like it didn't matter to me if I didn't know you. I'd go to the cafeteria and I'd see someone sitting by themselves. I'll go chat up with that person, that was me. And so I really enjoyed my time in Hawaii, and I don't really remember a lot of homesickness and all that because I was just immersed in there
Wow.
and in the education, and I loved learning. And so I was just soaking everything in and taking it all in and like, yeah, appreciating everything. That's what I can recall.
So while you were there in Hawaii and soaking up all the experience and getting out there, which is so good to do so that you take advantage without allowing yourself to feel sorry that you're away from home, right? What was it that you miss about home other than your family? Was it the cookie? Was it the food? Was it waking up in the morning and that first smell of Sunday? And like for us in Samoa, it's the umu. Every
Yeah.
place in the village, you have the smell of smoke because everyone's outside early in the morning preparing the umu. What was it that about your home that you missed while you were in Tonga? I mean, not Tonga, in Hawaii. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess on Sundays in Tonga we exchange food with the neighbors, and I was always the one to go give food to our neighbor, and then and get food from the neighbor as well. So on the way home, I'd be eating it. I think one thing I really remember was just the food. For the first time in my life, I ate rice in Hawaii, and it tasted like plastic to me. It's just like, man, how do you eat this thing? Like, what is it meant to do? Because all my life I've only eaten meat with taro and tapioca and all that, and so I'm just like, man, and I think my body also reacted to that, to the new food and stuff. So I remember, I think my first semester in Hawaii, I had boils all over and I couldn't figure out what, but I think looking back, it was from the changing in the diet and all that. So there's one thing I missed. I also just loved, because here, it was so free to be where I'm from, which is where I'm really right now. I'm back home where I was born and raised. And so I had this freedom to roam around and be anywhere. And I'd come from school. When I return to my village, it's like I'm free to do whatever. When I'm in school, there's a routine, there's a schedule, there's something to do. And I think I missed that a lot when I was in Hawaii, like the laid back kind of life, the fact that I can, come after school and just walk over to the neighbors and play marbles with the boys, or call out to another neighbor and sit and chat. Everyone seemed so busy in Hawaii. Like they had a purpose, they had their own schedule, they had a set routine. And I miss just having that at home. I miss just being free. And I remember one time I actually went to the senior home. I think it was in Kahuku. There was a senior home there. I just missed going to the elderlies, listening to them, telling the story. So on Saturdays, I'd take the bus to go to Kahuku. Someone had told me there was a senior home there. So I went to the senior home and just went and cleaned their homes and chatted with them. And I remember, I think there was a Samoan or a Hawaiian lady named Violet there who became a very close friend with mine. I went and washed their toilet and all that because I missed that so much here in Tonga. And I just wanted to sit and just talk and, speak loudly. And I remember calling my family. I was like, hey, guess what? Because they always tell me, man, why do you always talk so loudly? I'm like, guess what? This is the norm when I go to the senior home. They actually say for the first time they can hear a person from beginning to end because I talk so loud. But yeah, those were the things I missed. I just missed the village life, the fact that you can really relax and not have to worry and not to have a schedule. And sometimes in Hawaii I would sit and I'm like, man, I just want to be home right now and just roam and go swimming and stuff and forget about the stress of school and work.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, in college, right? You're always studying the other races. You're studying their study behavior or their study habits, right? For me, I always heard the Chinese students are very brilliant, and I wanted to see what makes them different than us, right? Or what kind of study habits can I adopt to help me, right? To push me further along. Because I felt like maybe there's something missing, right? But what I noticed was the Asian students, they were easy to, as a group work, they'll work in groups and they'll ask you, how did you solve that problem, right? And you're like, okay, here's how I solved it. And they're like, okay, cool. But what I also learned was when I asked them, they'll be like this, whoa, blocking you off. And that to me was a culture shock because I thought if I shared with you, you in return will share with me. But I realized they're not like that. Well, not all Asians, the Chinese students were like that. But then, I think they're pushed more at a competitive edge, right? Gain as much as you can, but then don't reveal too much to your competitor. But I thought, it was a unique way of me seeing that competitive edge, right? But then I go back to what you were saying earlier. Going to Hawaii, it was a different lifestyle. And it's the same thing when I got to the University of Oklahoma. No one cared about you and your struggles, right? Because they were all there to get educated. And what I learned was it was a cutthroat business. You had to step over each other to attain that degree. And I hated that it was like that. But then it also gave me what I learned. My weakness as a Samoan person was the fa'aloalo, the respect. And I had too much respect in me that almost put me to where I was always putting someone else before me. And it took a while for me to finally break that and say, that fa Samoa stuff is good with the Samoan people, but I can't be competitive, if I keep on being respectful. Oh, you go first. Oh, here's you, here you go. You can't be always gifting. I mean, that doesn't work, at least on the Palangi side, from my perspective. It works in the Samoa way because we're always like, hey, here you go. And then they'll say the same thing. No, you go. And then you're exchanging back and forth. What is your perspective? Have you seen anything similar to that, when you're in BYU?
In BYU, I think one of the things that the professors almost always mentioned to me was how I got along with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never really saw them, oh, you're Asian or Polynesian, you're Palang. Like, to me, I'm like,
Yeah.
you're a human being. I'll talk to you. That's just how I saw everyone. So, because I think the professors saw that in the classes, I was always chatting away with somebody, laughing with somebody you would know. That's why I'm like, man, Lessa, we were there at the same time. Like, how come we didn't see each other? Because I'm that way. Like, I would come and say hello to you and I would talk to you and I'll get to know you. And that's how I've been. Like, even in, I actually, so I was taking English as a major and also psychology as a minor, I think. And when I was I almost completed my English literature degree, but part of that requirement, I had to take some linguistics classes. I went to the linguistics classes, and the dean for TESOL over there was teaching English to speakers of other languages. He saw exactly what I'm describing, how I am in class with everyone, because I'll be laughing with the Asians and, making fun of somebody in class and all that. Like, but in the end, we're like all friends. And so he called me. The dean called me and it's like, oh, if you're willing, if you can come and take on TESOL, we'll give you a scholarship because we feel this is the kind of student that we would like to have, to prepare to go out to the world. And I thought about it a lot. I prayed about it and stuff. And I actually made that shift. Like, my English literature professors were so disappointed because I almost completed a program. And I'm like, man, I'm going to try TESOL. And they gave me yeah, going to TESOL was so different. It was like going to a whole different world because in English literature, it was like I felt we were always competing, and I always felt like, I couldn't measure up, and I was reminded time and time again that that I speak English as a second language. Whereas when I went to TESOL, like almost everyone, came from, and it was a requirement in TESOL that you had to speak another language. So in terms of academic, I felt like I wasn't really challenged in the classroom, but I had really diverse friends. Like, I would sit there and ask them and I would laugh. Like, that's just how I was, And so even the Asians, like, I have so many Asian friends. Later, when I worked and traveled internationally, everywhere I went, a friend was waiting for me. I'd go Thailand and like someone flew over to come wait for me at the airport, or I'd go Malaysia and someone was already waiting, and they were all from Hawaii. And I'm like, man, like, I'm so glad I got to know these people. So, yeah, I don't know why. Like, I would go to people, and I think in terms of storytelling and stuff, I approach people that way. I'm always just seeing them, oh, you're just a human being. and surely there's something wonderful I'll get to know about you, and I'll love you, and we'll be best friends.
It's your it's a
Maybe my
lovable spirit.
personality is too much.
You're more lovable than I am. They have trust issues when they're around me.
So speaking of terms of humility and getting to be more, friendly with everybody, it had to start somewhere. So let's go back to your childhood because it plays a big part in who you are and how you were able to take Sia to Hawaii in a whole new different place and be able to adapt very well. So Sia, tell us about your upbringing. Tell us how it was for you growing up in Tonga, how the life was in your journey as a child before you got to Hawaii.
Man, I had a wonderful childhood because I think we didn't have a lot. There was a lot that we were lacking. I didn't even have electricity growing up. And I remember also our little home, because I'm the oldest, my parents married and then I was the child. They had the year after their marriage. So the struggle to start a family, to have a home, all that, I was with them throughout all of that, and saw all of it growing up. And as I look back, it was very, very humble beginnings. I remember lying on my back with just a ground, the soil, and then there was like a mat on top, and then we would lie on top of that. Sometimes it would be coconut leaves before the mat, and I remember just having a kerosene lamp, and so like there were a lot of things looking back in terms of material things that we lacked as a family, and my parents we didn't have a lot of money, but as I look back in my childhood, it was so rich because I was taught from a very young age how to be responsible, because I'm the oldest, and not only as a daughter but also as a granddaughter, there were a lot of expectations. I felt like all my parents' hopes were with me, and I was the one to actually make their dreams come true. And so I carried a lot of that responsibility, and I took it seriously. And I think my parents were very intentional that like our child is going to go to university, our child is going to do well in school, because they really prioritized education. And I remember when I went to primary school, like I would always be, because they'll call out every year or like every term, they will call like from number 1 to number 30 or however many kids in the class, who's number 30 down to the first one. And I remember from the first to the 6th grade, I was always number 1, and so like I felt that my parents were very intentional, very serious about me and responsibilities and stuff. I had responsibilities at home. And I was taught, how to respect people around me. I remember a very important time. I think I was in the 4th grade at the time. I was young. I remember the teacher called me as first in class, but he also said, he said in Tongan, what he was really saying was like, even though she's very smart, her attitude is like the worst. And, like I didn't fully understand it until I went back home. And my father sat me down at home, and he's like, man, look around you. And, and I was like, oh, look around. And like, I look around. He's like, what do you see? And I was like, well, our house. And he's like, yeah, that's the house you come from. You have no electricity. You lie on the back, there's no bed for you in this house. And, if you look at it, it's like, pieces of timber put together. That's the house where you come from. That's where you grew up. And he's like, and because you come from that, you have no right whatsoever to disrespect any person. Just because you think you're smart up here, doesn't mean that you disrespect everyone else. You brought shame to our family. I remember crying. See, I remember that, and I carry that with me, like how my father was so hurt, that his daughter is very smart, but she's like, really bad at the same time because she's disrespectful. Because I remember in class, like I would go up and like cut the teacher's hair without the teacher knowing, because there was something I didn't like about him in class, or like, and the teacher would beat us up, and I hated that, and I tried to get back on it by doing something. And so I think the teacher didn't like that. But I remember my father sitting me down, and I think he was trying to remind me, like I have no reason whatsoever to think that I was somebody, like when I'm home, I'm a daughter, like, and I knew better and he told me it was better for him that if I would be last in class, but that my attitude would be better. And that was changing a very important, crucial time for me, that my father had taught me that very young. And since then, I always try, wherever I go, that I remember my roots. They always say, mo'oi manatu in Tongan, which is to live remembering, and my father reminded me that the importance of that. I had thought that I was giving them joy in, doing good in education because that's what we were taught. But like, that day he reminded me, it's like, your education is of no use to us if that's your attitude, if you're gonna treat everyone like that. And it changed how I was. And so, yeah, I think to come back to the question, I come from really humble beginnings, and because we didn't have a lot at home, I think I learned very young to live within my means, to just enjoy what we had. I had responsibilities to feed the pigs, feed the chickens, and all those things at home, and there was a lot of expectations for me. So just growing up in that way and being taught by my parents, and also having the gospel, like having faith and all those things really molded me to become a better person. And that I learned also that education wasn't just in the classroom, it was also available everywhere. So yeah.
You know what, Sia, when you talk about your upbringing, I don't think a lot of people in this world who lives such a luxury life in America or wherever there are. To me, what you're describing is actually a rich life. I would love to go back to that, to where
Yeah.
there's no electricity. Because I remember back then when I was growing up, we did have the kerosene type of light until my dad's business got to where it needed to be. But I do remember that, and it's you don't know you're poor.
Yeah.
You don't. And the food you eat is so organic and it's
Yes.
rich and healthy. You can eat for days and not gain a single ounce. But what you described was such a humble beginning with such a rich life that you were able to take that with you and build the way that you are because of the life's lesson, right? How many
Yeah.
siblings do you have? Yeah.
I only have two brothers. I actually don't have a sister. So I'm the oldest. I don't have a sister. I had two brothers. One of them was adopted by a couple who didn't have children. And they asked my mom, and, my mom gave away that brother, and it became their oldest child. So I just grew up with only my brother. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of siblings. But everyone always think wherever I am, they're like, "Oh, you must come from a big family."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I come from the smallest family, because I'm, like I said before, I'm so loud, I'm so, happy and all that. And I owe that to how I was brought up by my parents. And, talking about that, like when I look back, I actually have something at home that I call the Angilau wealth, like how we define wealth. And I think this is just a
Yeah.
good time to talk about that. Like all my life, people talk about the better life. We're migrating because we want to seek the better life. It's out there, it's somewhere, it's in America, it's in Australia, it's in New Zealand. And I told my husband a couple of times, I said to him, man, like we have to redefine the better life. Because for me, even when I went to Hawaii, I loved all the things there, but I just wanted to be home. I just wanted to be around the elderlies of my village and feel their love from them. I just want to sit with my uncle under a tree and laugh our heads off about, his days of his mom beating him.
Yeah.
Those little things. I just want to go home and just swim in the ocean. The simple life, I guess. Because when you live a simple life, like you really know your priorities and what matters most. And I think for our family, I told my husband, we have to redefine the better life. We can't always go. Like I remember when I graduated from BYU Hawaii, my uncle almost disowned me. I told you I had an uncle in Hawaii. He almost disowned me because he was so angry that I would return back home to Tonga. He's like, you have a chance here. You're given an opportunity to be here in the dreamland of America. Why don't you stay here and help your family? Stop being selfish. And I'm like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to help my family there. And I'm going to live the life I want to live. Like, this is not the life for me. I just know it. I'm going to go home. And he was so angry. He didn't talk to me for a while because he just thought I was so selfish that I'd return back home to being poor. He's like, you want to go home to being poor? And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to being poor. I'm going back to the rich life.
Yeah.
So as a family, I told my husband, we need to redefine the better life and wealth for us, and because for me, it's not in material things. It's not in having a lot of things materialistically. For me, my wealth is different. If it's okay, I want to read that to you because I carry it around with me. It's like our
Yeah, go
Angilau
ahead.
wealth. We are
Go ahead.
rich in inner peace, where hearts rest untroubled and minds are clear. We are rich in love, a bond unbroken, warm as the heart. We are rich in faith, trusting in what is unseen, steady as the sunrise. We are rich in growth, ever learning, ever becoming, stretching toward the light. We are rich in wellness, in bodies cared for and spirits nourished. We are rich in family, our circle unshaken, our roots deep and strong. We are rich in craft, hands shaping, minds creating, beauty made real. We are rich in community, woven into the lives of others, giving and receiving. We are rich in adventure, seeking wonder, meeting the world with open eyes. We are rich in service, offering ourselves for the good of others joyfully. This is our treasure. This is our legacy. This is our way of life. I wanted to instill that in my children while they're young, that this is how your parents define wealth. This is how we see the better life. Like here in Tonga, even right now, like people think that, I'm doing all these things and I come from a mansion and I come like we have electricity. We have, things that I didn't have as a child. So in a way we are developing and progressing forward. But I brought, that's why I'm still living where I was born and raised. I brought my daughter home so she can have the little sense of the rich life that I used to have growing up as a child, to roam free, to go swim in the ocean, to still go, run around in the dirt with the kids in the neighborhood. Yeah, and that's why I brought them back here. I'm sorry if I'm like off topic,
No,
but just wanting
no.
to nail in on that. And I feel like for me, like the rich life is the content life. I've taken stories and interviewed many people out there in the ocean, isolated islands. I would sit with them and I'm like, man, like, what do these people live for? I mean, there's nothing in my perspective from where I come from. And as you talk to them, they're just like, this is home, our identity is attached to our land here. This is peace. We don't want to come to the main island because we won't be free. Here you get from here. And I'm like, yeah, like when you see things through there, it's like, this is rich for them. So I've really redefined that for me. Like I don't see it as a special place. It's like wealth is what you make of it. And I want to define my own wealth and richness.
I love that. I
You know,
truly love that.
I love that, what you said. And I want to thank you for going back home and having that boldness to go back home. And I have a cousin that just retired from the military, and I was just sharing with her. She was hired to go back home, take over as CEO of Astica. I think that's the name of the business back in American Samoa. And it reminds me of what you've done. And I told my cousin, I'm going to pray for your journey and, the new position that you take, because I didn't have that courage to leave my family here in America. I didn't want to take that risk because you build all this wealth, like what you're saying, the wealth that we build here. I was afraid I was going to lose that. I didn't know if I can make up that, back home. But I share that passion that you have, but I don't have the boldness that you have. And that's why I wish I could be in your shoes. And I love what you're doing, because you're actually returning home to do the things that a lot of us have in our minds that we want to do. But then when it comes to like, okay, go do it, we're like, oh yeah, maybe not. So, my dad and mom sent me to the States to join the military to provide for them back home. And I didn't like our culture because our culture was indebting us, so much that it pushed me away from the culture. Because of that, I kind of left the culture on the side. As I got older and older, I realized I needed to change the Samoan culture because the financial part. So in order for me to make change, I had to learn the culture. I had to go and get a title because you have no voice unless you have a title. So in order for me to make change within my own family and with my own Samoan people, I had to go through these hurdles and learn all the Samoa, learn, the history. And I had a talk with my dad, and I told him, now that I'm studying the culture and I'm learning it more, I feel that you sent me I'm rich. Like I have a similar story what you're saying. And I told my dad, I'm rich in the white man's world. Like all this money I couldn't imagine me making. I'm making like so much money. But what good is that? I'm not rich in my culture. So I told him I'd rather be rich in my culture than being rich, in the Palangi way. And then he said, there's a lot of people in Samoa that would like to be in your shoes, And he said, I was on the opposite side. And he kind of joked it off. He said, you know what? Trust me, you don't want to be on the other side. But I said, no, I envy our Samoan people that are strong in the culture. I envy those chiefs that can just, go out there and deliver a speech, flawlessly. That is something I don't have because I chose to be rich in, the Western way. Didn't want to get it too long into it, but I just want to, I don't know if I'm expressing how grateful I am what you do, because I want to be in your shoes to have that bonus to just go and do it, Thank you for all you do and returning. And I know you're
I also sympathize with you, Arlington. I know a lot of, I've come in my years of travel, I've always come about people like that, their heart
Right.
is with the homeland, but like they're not quite sure whether they'll fit back in, or, there are a lot of reasons and stuff. But I think for me personally, like I was so rooted in my upbringing that I'm like, man, like I want to go back and give back to the very thing
Yeah.
that had made me who I am, and it's not without its struggles. Like we've had a lot of struggles and even with the culture. And that's one thing I want to say here as well. Like I define the culture for me. Like there's the Tongan culture and then there is the Sia culture. And I think if there's any boldness, like I'm very bold in living my culture that I aspire for. There are some
Oh, yeah.
parts, like I talked before about names, it is a name that's reserved, usually for the side of the family. But when I had mine with my husband, we're like, man, like I really want as a mother, I really want my journey in terms of pregnancy and all that reflected in the name. So, I want to have a say in the name of my children. And that
Right.
was the case, So we just created our own culture. When we had our wedding with my husband, we didn't want anything, nothing. We just wanted very simple, just ask the people we love, the people that's close to us, that matter to us. That's all that we wanted. And then we didn't have a reception. We didn't have photographies and all those things. Like that was like extras for us. We didn't want, To me, that's a simple culture that I want. So we did it exactly as that way, even though my mom was so angry, wouldn't talk to me and all that, because she wants to do like the showing off mitts and doing all these things. And I'm just like, no, I don't want that, So it's for me, like, I'm very adamant at like creating the kind of culture that makes sense to me, even
Yeah.
within the Tongan culture. They would say like, when we have family obligations, you gotta give this or do that. And I'm just like, I just don't have that right now. So I'm not gonna come, Like I'm always at odds with my mom when it comes to stuff like that. And she'll be like, man, we need to do this. We need to give. I'm like, man, we're not in a position to give right now. I'm not going to give. She's like, no, but this is it. I'm like, I don't care. So,
Yeah.
that's just how I am, like we live in this culture and there are things that you do and you're obligated to do. But like, I also kind of was like, all right, is this something that I feel that I should
Yeah.
take on, or not? And then I was like, all right, this part of the culture, I don't want to live it. I'll just not do it.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from because especially where you have to really break that bridge where it's you have to say no. You just have to be bold and say no, even if it means cutting ties with families. Family's gonna love you no matter what. They'll always come around, even if it means days, years, hours, or whatever. They'll love you no matter what. Speaking of family and speaking of those you have interviewed, I wanted to ask you, of all the many peoples that you have interviewed, right? What was one story that stood out to you the most that really empowered you?
Man, that's a hard one because I feel the way I approach it which is why it's also easy for me to get to know people everywhere, is because I always feel like somewhere in your journey, like I can relate to, and there's a point of us relating and connecting. But you also have your own uniqueness, and that's how I approach stories. So I won't keep like there's no one story that stands out to me because I feel in each story there was a bit of me
Yeah.
in it. There's also a uniqueness to it, but the one thing that I always regret is the untold story. I usually pray about, excuse me, at the time. Now I'm more like really too busy to do it daily. And you'll see on the page that I've kind of slacked a bit. But when I used to just do it every day, like I would wake up in the morning and I would pray and ask Heavenly Father if He can guide me. Who would you like, for me to tell his or her story today? And I'm just like, man, Heavenly Father, can you make sure I know when I see the person to actually do the story? And that's how it's been guided. And so random because like I had planned the details that the stories will be where I am, so that it's convenient for me. I don't have to go look for the story. It just happens to be there wherever I am, it could be at the shop, it could be in town or wherever I am, like, because I saw everyone has stories. So the
Yeah.
untold story that I remember is I was at this hangar. So I was in a project and we went to the hangar at the airport and because I was busy, like I was trying to do a report after that visit. We went with youth from all over Tonga. And as I was sitting there, I had this prompting that I needed to go and write the story. Like I had the prompting, oh, that's the person that you need to do the story. And I saw it and I'm like, man, he's too busy working. And then there's all these kids and I have to take notes for my, all that. And then I had the prompting again, this is the story. And I'm like, man, all right, I'll come and do it after. When we go, I'll come back and do his story. When I got home that evening, I saw on my Facebook that the person that I was supposed to do the story, he died the very evening. And, and I was just like, man, like you missed that. You missed out because you didn't listen to that prompting. You should have gone and done, like, imagine. And it was a sudden death. It was an unexpected death because he wasn't sick. There was really nothing, no sign or anything. He just passed on. And I was like, man, and I remember just crying without even knowing the person, I was just crying at home. Nobody knew, but I was just like, man, Heavenly Father, I'm so sorry I didn't do that. I didn't act on the prompting. Like, we would have had so much to say about him and had some memory for his family to hold on to, but I failed in that. So that's the instant that stands out to me. It was the untold story, like, because now I keep living and wondering what could have been the story. Yeah, but of all the stories I tell, not one story stands out because at certain points in my journey, I reflect on a phrase that someone had said, the world is your oyster, or someone has said, like the sun will come out, or, money is money. And so like those phrases would come because those stories resonate with me in their own way. So yeah, that's what I can think of.
Wow.
Leslie, can you pull up some of our viewers there?
Okay.
I think someone was trying to make a comment there. Sorry, Sia.
No, you're fine.
We try to bring in our viewers too. They're also engaged.
That's good.
I'm always getting caught up in American pop culture. Until a few weeks back, I decided to look up programs about back home in American Samoa, and I came across the podcast. Tip my hat off to you guys for making, like it continues somewhere, me feel at home with your program. Appreciate it. You guys really are the Pulse of Polynesia and the Pacific as a whole. And mālō aupito to Sister Sia for sharing your story with us. Thank you, Hi Chief, and from Tama Samoa from the Bay Area. Living a simple, modest life is often mistaken for weakness, poverty, or a lack of ambition, when in reality it is a voluntary and intentional choice driven by a desire for contentment and purpose. And from Mika, yep, Fatongia, my grandparents do this till death. Different to the younger generation now, too much technology, TV, phone, internet, etc.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually love how you put that into perspective, how we all have stories and there's a lot of uniqueness in the stories that you tell, but it's the untold story that resonates the most, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of untold, what is untold about Sia that we don't know about?
I guess there's a lot. My journals would know because the untold things publicly are told in my journal. It has been the one thing that has always been with me. I think if there's something about me that most people are like, I like to just tell people I'm Sia because I'm just an ordinary person. I don't think there is much about me that's different from anybody, like I think the thing most people don't know about me is, even though like I was an extrovert, like, I say I was because I feel like I'm an introvert now. Even though I have all these people, and like I have skills that I would, be able to talk to just anybody. There are times when I just want to be by myself. Please don't bother me. Sometimes I'm just at my house and I'm just like, I don't want to see people today. Please don't bother me. Or like, if you're watching this program and you're like, so you were there in the house, like sometimes people would come honk outside my house or call out my name and yell out, and my husband had told him that I'm in the house. And I'm just like, nope, not today. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. There is an expectation, that because of the way I am, like you're always there, and that you make time for everybody and all that. But like now I'm just like, so there's something about me. Sometimes I just treasure my time alone. Please don't bother me. I just want to be here by myself alone and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Funny you mentioned that. Sorry, there's this memory that comes up growing up back in Samoa. The villagers are taught to always have respect to anyone that passes by your home, especially the pastor, the whaifeau.
Yeah.
So every time our pastor would pass by, my dad always would yell out, "Hey, pastor, come in, rest from the sun,
Yeah.
let us, we have a meal prepared for you."
Yeah.
And we never have a meal, but dad knows that the pastor will always decline. And I was telling dad one day, I said, "Dad, one day the pastor's going to accept your invite, and then what are you going to do?" And he says, "We'll see." But, I think out of the 20 times dad would invite pastor, he never did. And then the one day came and the pastor said, "Okay, I will now accept your, your respect." And I said, "Now what? Now what, Dad?" And then my dad's like freaking out because there's no food. And he says, "Run to Uncle's house and see if they have any food, So everyone is scrambling and the pastor's now having a conversation in front. It's like almost an hour passed. And I know the pastor's probably thinking, "Where's this meal you promised me? You just interrupted me." But, it's funny how you mentioned certain things and it jogged my memory. But I wanted to get back to a comment you made earlier about the ranking structure in your class, right? You say 30 to 1. For the families that rank 30, right? Have you experienced what happens in that household, the pressure that the parents place upon those that finish last? What is that like?
It had been, I think, when I went to high school, I was so used to being first. And I went to a high school where they pick the best. So there's a national exam that you sit when you get to the 6th grade, and that determines which high school you go to. So the high school that I went to had required the highest marks, that you would you have to get that certain mark. And there was pressure on me to actually get there. I made it, but on my first year, remember, I'm so used to being first, I was called out as 5th in class, I think, and also 15th overall, which was a big feat, because this is national, and all that. But I was just so disappointed that I wasn't first. And then I became a high school teacher, and then I would see that, kids actually get punished corporally, they get beaten up for being that, because it's like you're bringing shame to the family, you're doing all these, things. And I think that's why a lot of us are stepping away from that and having, my daughter goes to a private school, and the school it's called praise giving instead of prize giving, and there's no ranking like that. It's just like every kid receives a certificate that says, confident or like kindness or something, and that's more meaningful to me, So like I take my daughter there because I want her to be celebrated for the wonderful things. And as a teacher, when I was a teacher, knowing that, like I would call in the parents and tell them, like I believe every kid is smart. You're just smart in different ways, what is being called out is like academically, it's just be doing good in the classroom, but and then I would recall people in Tonga that are very successful, even though they did not do well in the classroom, and it's something that I really believe in, because I've seen that, like the shame it brings to your family, just like that one day when the teacher said that like my attitude was so bad, to my dad, that felt like I was called as the last in class, even though I was called as first in class. So that pressure is real. And I think it comes from just because we're in small tight communities where we each know each other, and then there are phrases that you're called throughout the rest of your life. The Tongan terms they use, like for being stupid, always the last. And that usually carries throughout your life, those labels are with you for life,
Amen.
And so I didn't like that, and I don't like that. So the little bit that I can influence, I do that with people, when they're like, "Meh, my daughter is just so stupid." I'm like, "Wait, what does your daughter do that's good?" And they'll be like, "I think she's good at this." I'm like, "Yeah, strengthen that, because, one day that's going to be the greatest blessing for your family." And that's the same thing with everyone. And that's why in my storytelling, I like to honor everybody, because like you contribute to the world. There is goodness in you regardless, and that's why like I go with the prisoners. Like when I started the stories, I went to the prisoners, I went to people who like were homeless. even though Tonga says we don't have any homeless people, or like those who were poor in terms of material things, I wanted to go to those people because I know there's goodness in them, maybe right now you're struggling, but you're gonna do better, and maybe right now everyone thinks, you're a disappointment, but I know there's something good about you that you can share with us, that had been the thing that drove me to tell the stories that I tell, and that's what gives me the greatest joy.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is you've hammered that home because I wanted to see if there's similarities in the Samoa way and the Tongan way. And I tell you right now, there is. And I wanted to share the story of me and my brother growing up in Samoa. My dad moved us from California to Samoa. Mind you, we didn't speak any Samoan. We only understood English. And I picked up the Samoan language within 3 months while we're there. I was in fourth grade, I think. The summer between third and fourth grade. My brother, who was a year older than me, he didn't pick up the Samoan language, so he struggled with it. But my dad and mom forced us to go to Samoan school. Mind you, Samoan school is only spoken in Samoan. So we're already at a disadvantage. First year, I think we both finished miserably last because we didn't understand Samoan, right? But in the Samoan school, you were whooped because you couldn't read the Samoan Bible. You were whooped because you couldn't speak the language. But the second year around, I felt better that I was now be able to compete because I now was able to read the Samoan Bible. I was able to speak their language. But then my brother didn't pick it up as I did. But then the same thing happened like what you mentioned. They called out his class and he finishes last. And what does my dad do? He's so embarrassed. He gets up and he walks out the church. He's pissed off. And I'm like, oh my God, my brother's going to get a whooping when he gets home. But then why didn't dad think about this is he's pretty much a Palangi kid. He's a Samoan kid, but he doesn't know Samoan. But he's going to get punished because he doesn't know the Samoa. But it brought back, these memories. But going back to what you were saying, these kids eventually become successful in life. And I look back at my brother now, he's a pastor, right? And, he now knows how to speak Samoan, but he's a pastor. A great turnaround because my dad always thought I was going to be the one that goes and answer the calling into the church. And I didn't go that route, but then instead it was the guy that didn't do well in the Samoan church school. That's actually the pastor today. It's good to, I wanted to revisit that. And the word that we use in Samoa is ʻUhila. Like you said, ʻUhila stays with you forever. People will look at you and say, hey, I remember you were ʻUhila from back then. I think you said it was valekua, right? The word. So that our word is ʻUhila. It's a shameful word to be labeled with. Right. I love that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That is so true, especially like coming from the islands. We're Tonga's got so many islands. Samoa has many different islands, but it feels like everybody knows everyone. And
Mhm.
once someone finds out about one little thing about you, then the word starts to spread, the label gets tacked onto you, and then you grow up feeling like, oh, this is the name calling everybody knows you as. And but it's like what you said. It took for me to get outside in America to realize I'm not even I'm not even what people think that I am. And I've learned one thing from my professor who tested my kids. So they said that there are two types of people that goes to jail, right? And one of them is they're just crazy, crazy. But the other one is it's because they're too smart. They have a very high IQ. And so while they were growing up, nobody was able to handle that or deal with those kind of kids. The ones that are because they're on the go, they're busy, they're loud, and because they just don't know how to handle that the adrenaline and how they are. And so that's one of my kids. So they tell you just got to keep them busy. You got to keep them occupied and doing things. And so when you said that you were looked at as a bad kid, and this and very smart, and I thought like, oh my gosh, that was like my kid. And but then I was told how to handle that. Was everybody like in the school system, right? In school system, everybody's like, this is a certain way that we have to be. Because I remember getting beaten up, whipped by our principal, Faretti. I don't know if you know or remember Faretti. He was one of our principal for our high school just because I was late. And I got so mad and I said, can I make a call to my mom? Because you need to whip her. And she's the reason why I came to school late. But it's crazy because I don't know if that's still going on back home. But at the same time, I kind of wish that still happens right now in the school because these kids in America need some discipline. You know, some of these kids, not all of them, but people don't take my word for it. I'm just saying it. It's just a statement. But going back to Sia and your upbringing, you now have a family. And I know like with Arlington and with me and with everybody else, when we get married, we take a piece of that person, right? So what is it with your spouse? What was his strength that you took upon yourself to make it you, to build up upon, like to make a part of Sia? What was it about him? How did you guys meet? Was because he's Samoan, right? Was he in Tonga or would you guys meet in BY? Got it.
You knew of each other though, right? You knew of each other from high school though.
Mm. Yeah. Sia, how many kids do you have? How did motherhood change the way you are?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Sia, are there any like specific values you're trying to deter away from your kids of pursuing? And I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier one of the weakness that I feel that my culture placed upon me was the respect. To me, it sort of haunted me through my journey, at least in the United States. So I figured, my daughter's going to grow up in the States. She's not really going to be involved in the Samoan culture. I wanted her to be more brash, more independent. So I raised her to be like this, like a menace, the opposite of me. I wanted her to be combative. And as she got older, she was more mouthy, but then I liked it because that's not me, right? Because I'm always like, respect. I was told respect, respect, respect. So it takes a lot to get anger out of me because like I don't have like if you piss me off, you've done like so much to get that out of me, but you won't see that out of me. But then I want that in my daughter because I didn't like I didn't want her to grow up in a world that I know she's going to get into where people will step on you, right? Take advantage of you. So the question I have for you is there any area that you're redirecting your daughter from or not wanting her to pursue? And I think we may have lost her.
Yes, I think she's sure. Okay, she's gonna try to come back again.
Okay. Did you
So
understand what? Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was asking.
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Amen. No,
yeah.
that's just beautiful. I love that.
I like that. Lie down unto the Lord and he will direct thee for good. So that's pretty good too. And it's really hard when you have social media and all these technology try to influence your kids. But if you are ahead of that game, your child will lean towards mostly to what you've instilled in them in the beginning. But then we hope that as they move on their own life, sometimes they go through these phases where they make these changes or challenges allows them to change, but we hope that the tools that we have set in place for them as they're young, they would be remembered of those things to help them get back on their feet and remember the Lord. So, and I only say this because my kids are older, and it's like I pray that they stay close to the Lord, but when they do fall, that the tools that was set in place for them will help them in their journey as they make those challenges, get through those challenges. Now, I wanted to ask you, Sia, as a lot of people don't know. Actually, you have like 60,000 followers and plus more. And I know I didn't want to talk about that because we want to know who Sia is. We want to know the journey she's come and the humble beginnings of how you came about and this what stays with me is what you said in the beginning when you were at Hawaii. Instead of being where everybody wants to be at, you wanted to go where the old people were, the nursing home in Kahuku. What drove you to be that way? What was it? I know it's everybody was created for a reason, and I feel like that's your calling. That's why you came to be the way you are. What was it about that, Sia, that drove you to become that way? Wow. Speaking of the community, going back to Tonga, right? Like in Samoa, there is still stuff that we have a lot of problems with within our own island. What is it about? What problem in your community would it let you sleep, and how did that become the work you lead now?
I love the work that you've done. Listen to your story, and every time you share about your dad, it almost feels like we share the same dad. My dad is a hot fuse, always, ready to explode. He's a compassionate person, but I wanted to ask this question. Was there at any point that you felt that the blessings that you were receiving as a poor family, that your dad was giving away that same blessing that was meant for you. And I only asked that because I always felt guilty, or not guilty, but that was the anger that I have because I grew up poor. But then my dad did the same thing your dad did. He was a very generous person. And every time he had a blessing, knowing that we didn't have any food on the table, he was always quick to give because he knew that that family needed it too. And then he came home empty-handed, and we always asked, like, "What did you bring?" And he said, "Well, that family needed more than us. Trust the Lord, the blessings will come." I'm like, I think that was our blessing. Yeah, you just gave away our blessing. How many times are you gonna give away our blessing? Did you ever feel that way, that Dad is giving away our blessing to others that we needed to? Mhm. Man.
So, Sia, talking about our Heavenly Father, right? As you got into adulthood and you moved on from BYU and you're now married, you have a family, you have children. I know we go through those phases where we battle with God in different parts, right? Where was the time tell us about the time where you wrestled with God and it helped change your perspective and the things that you were dealing with and the challenges you were facing? The situation. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanted to add, I had turned down a lot of, I mentioned this before, I had turned down a lot of job offers and stuff because of motherhood, family, it was, even though the spirit told me, don't do that job, it made me angry. But in your situation, you you tell us about the job, your dream job we had spoken about last night during our test trial, and how that turned you around when you thought that this dream job was gonna take you far, but it ended up taking you to a different direction. Yeah. Yeah. I love that because like I totally understand where you're coming from because as a mother, you have to put aside your wants to fulfill the duties as a mother, responsibilities, that you even though you could have like I could have made a lot of money, do investment marketing and all that stuff, but the wealth and the legacy comes from the building and establishment of your family and your children. I'm gonna switch gears and talk about something else that was very unique, and it had to do with the song "I Stand All Amazed," right? I didn't know until I read your post that the Tongan language, when having to translate English into Tongan, there are a lot of words that are missing. And so to be able to fit it, you have to be very precise in picking the right words to portray the lyrics of the song. So tell us about that because you played a part in that. So it's very interesting. Yeah. Imagine playing that on the piano. It's like
I was gonna ask you, forgive me for not knowing. Have you published these stories that you shared? And if you did, how does that work as for copyrights? Do you own the copyrights of those interviews that you've done with these stories? Yeah, I mean, strongly support it. I mean, with all the work that you do, I was just thinking you deserve to be, at least compensated for all the hard work that you do. Because people ask me, because I share a lot of the books that I read, and some of the books are no longer available, but people always ask, can you copy that? Can you send me a copy? At the same time, I'm saying the families deserve to be paid, right? The families, they've done a lot of hard work, exactly what you're doing. You're spending, painstakingly sitting down doing interviews. It's not easy. And compiling all your data and make sure, the verbiage is correct. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So I commend you for all the work that you do. And the Tongan people do deserve a book. And I'm glad that you have that in works. And is there any need of help in those areas? I say that because, I want to see if there's a voice out there that can lend a hand to help you.
yeah. So I know that Sia has so much to do and she's got a busy schedule, and I don't want to take up too much of her time. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sia, as we're getting close to the end of our podcast. There's so much to learn and talk about, but there's just not enough time. And I feel like, for all of our listeners who are out there, our audience who are going to be tuning in later on, I highly recommend that you look at the Original Tongan Lives Facebook page and support her work. It really does help, especially where it's like what you said, the untold stories are the ones that are very unique, right? And so we hope that those untold stories will come to contact with Sia, and so that she could be able to share those stories with you and the legacies that are left behind, when that time does come. Before I end, Sia, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience before we leave? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before I respond back to Sia, there's a comment that was made. And Sia, if you can read this for us, the last one that last popped up.
Okay. Mhm.
Sia, I couldn't thank you more, for sharing, your story with us. I think what stood out to me the most and was repeated throughout this podcast was your faith. I think that was paramount, or what I seen, above all, which I love that. You rarely hear people come out and profess their faith, and that's what their foundation is. So thank you for having that. And then again, we mentioned earlier the boldness to taking that step to go home. It's what we all want to do, but very few actually make that attempt. So you're living the life that we envy. We can only look from afar and say, we wish to do what she did.
Yeah.
Man, just a lot of respect for you in that aspect. Um, Giving back to the Tongan community, that speaks volumes. You mentioned the different types of compensation, and I like how you're always reminding us, it's not always about the money. You know, there's other ways to be compensated. There's other ways that pleases the heart. So we don't always do things for money, right? We're driven by what the heart leads us to. So having that compassion for our people, especially those who don't have things, those who are struggling. I mean, that's been your focal point. So I love the message that you're doing. And again, mālō, aupito. And then for our audience, as Sia said, thanks for all your cooperation tonight and your a lot of the comments that you guys have given. It just shows evidence of the work that Sia has done. So thank you for also collaborating, and for all our viewers for hanging in there. Our podcast would not be possible without our viewers. So, and for the future of our program, we love sharing these types of stories. So we say it again and again. It's not just limited to our name is Polynesia, but we try to extend it beyond, the Polynesian islands. We welcome the other islands across the Pacific, whether you're Micronesian or Melanesian. Please reach out. We'd like to have you on our podcast. These are beautiful stories that we all share across different islands. So these stories that you hear tonight, it was beneficial to our Tongan people, but like as you've heard, everything also applies to the Samoan island. So there's a reason why we say we're brothers, right? Because we share these same traditions and family values. And thanks again to Lasso for the hard work that you do for the podcast as well, setting up all our interviewees. So back to you, Lasso.
Again, thank you, Arlington, and thank you, Sia. Thank you to Brother Masada for bringing Sia on and collaborating with her to share her journey. And again, to all of you who are listening, go check out Sia's page. She is with the Ordinary Tongan Lives, which is very extraordinary, beautiful. I just love the stories and the journeys, and I feel like everybody would profit off of the lessons of life and those who are out there to be able to make those stories public for those who are in need. And again, to end this podcast, to God be all the glory, and everybody have a good night.